Pixar and Disney are two animation studio giants, and while Pixar is owned by Disney, their movies are usually compared to one another. This of course got us thinking about both of their latest films. Disney's Encanto took the world and the internet by storm, where even Google knows we don't talk about Bruno. And more recently, Pixar released Turning Red on Disney+, where it's also received critical acclaim. Sure, Turning Red has become a sort of battleground of opinions on the internet, but all that attention is also still good marketing for the film. But we want to know which of these two films is better. I'm Kyle with Wicked Binge, and this is Pixar's Turning Red versus Disney's Encanto. Which one was better? Now first off, we have to issue a spoiler warning for both films, so if you haven't seen either of them, we highly recommend checking them out on Disney+. And it goes without saying that these are going to be our subjective opinions, because everyone has their own opinion on movies. With that out of the way, let's talk about our first category, and that of course is the characters. Characters are the touchstone of every film, and relatable characters make a movie 10 times better. Now, both Encanto and Turning Red have great characters in their own way, and some of which are heavily relatable. Bruno has been touted as a perfect example of a heavily anxious and depressed person, which hits home for a lot of people.
I used to say my real gift was acting.
Mirabel exemplifies the forgotten and overlooked child who wants to prove themselves, and Luisa is a great example of a character who puts way too much on their plate to try and prove themselves as strong so that they're useful. From Turning Red, Meilin is similar to Mirabel because she tries to prove herself as perfect for her mom, due to her being an only child. Grandma Lee is nowhere near as bad as Abuela when it comes to grandmothers, but shows how even when trying to be helpful, you can still cause trauma. And Ming makes a great antagonist due to that trauma, something we'll get into later. Now, on the comedic side of things, Camillo uses his shape-shifting for great jokes, and shows to be quite funny throughout the film, while Felix is probably the most comedic relief character in the movie. Both Abby and Priya are also great comedic reliefs in Turning Red, where Abby kind of fulfills the role of angry comedy and slapstick to a degree, while Priya is hilarious with her deadpan humor. But in the end, we think that Encanto has the better characters overall, which isn't a dig at Turning Red's writing or characterization, but Encanto fleshed out all of their main characters in such a way that it's hard to beat. Another thing to touch on is the setting of both films. Both films have a very unique setting we don't usually get to explore during most animated films. For example, Encanto takes place in a hidden villa in Colombia and mostly takes place in Casita, the living home. Meanwhile, Turning Red takes place in the city of Toronto, Canada, and utilizes the Chinese subculture of the city to their advantage throughout the movie. Both of these settings are unique and different. However, we feel that Turning Red's setting is better. And maybe it's because of the era that the film takes place in being perfect for a storm of nostalgia, or the recognizable landmarks existing in the film, or the really cool utilization of Chinese culture, all of which we feel are slightly better than Encanto's settings, but only just barely. Next up, let's talk about the story. The quickest rundown of Encanto is as follows. Mirabel is a member of the prestigious Madrigal family. This family has a special gift of magic that allows them to help the people around them in their little community. Meanwhile, Turning Red features Meilin Lee,
But being 13 means I'm officially a grown-up.
who is part of a semi-important family in the Toronto area, and her family has a special gift that tends to be more of a nuisance than a help. Now, on the surface, these sound similar, but they're really not when you break them down. Encanto focuses on a family that helps the community around them through the use of a powerful magical gift that is given to them through a death of a loved one. Encanto then follows the story of Mirabel trying to stop the magical gift from dying out and feeling guilty about being the only person without a gift. Turning Red is a coming-of-age story where May learns to get used to her magical panda powers and comes into her own while also dealing with puberty. We have to give Encanto the edge on this one as well. While Turning Red is fun and definitely unique, Encanto is just a bit more memorable, and the story, in our opinion, leaves a bigger impact. Now, it might be obvious that this next one is a bit of a landslide, but let's talk about the soundtrack. Disney is well known for their amazing songs. The problem here is the fact that while Turning Red has a few fun and recognizable songs in their soundtrack like Nobody Like You, One True Love, and You Know What's Up, none of them are standout songs by Disney standards. However, Encanto has absolute instant classics. The Family Madrigal, Surface Pressure, and We Don't Talk About Bruno are all absolute bangers in their own ways. And honestly, even the background music is better in Encanto, so it's an obvious no-brainer as to why it wins in this category. Next, let's talk about each film's comedy. Encanto honestly lacks in lasting comedy, but it's certainly more focused on its themes rather than jokes. The running coffee joke with the little boy and the stairs joke in Bruno's room is pretty good, but honestly the best comedy around Encanto comes from the fanbase. Meanwhile, Turning Red has humor we love and have spoken on already very briefly. Priya's deadpan humor is great, Jin's background humor is also really good, and the movie handles some more mature jokes, most of which surrounding the topic of puberty, possibly better than any other Disney or Pixar film that we can remember. And the truth is, Turning Red focuses a lot more heavily on its comedy, especially in the first half of the movie. So it's no surprise that Turning Red wins when it comes to comedy. But similar to the previous section, we also want to speak about the tone. Turning Red, specifically the first half, is a very comedic movie, although it gets quite endearing and less comedic in the second half to explore its themes a bit deeper. Encanto, on the other hand, sacrifices a more comedic tone to be a bit darker and more mysterious, and stays generally pretty serious throughout the whole movie.
Just act normal. No one has to know.
While the film has a lot of jokes, its tone is much more focused on the saving of the miracle, and it genuinely gets really sad at some points, which just works really well for Encanto. And as much as we love Turning Red's comedy, we have to give Encanto the win when it comes to tone. We've been shifting around talking about them for a while, but next up is each movie's themes. A lot of films utilize smaller themes to connect with their audience and also enhance the major theme of the film. Both Encanto and Turning Red focus heavily on family, which might be one of the more relatable themes out there. But looking at things a bit more specifically, Encanto also features the themes of humility, because Mirabel has to be humbled by the fact that she's the only member of the family without a gift, and this leads into her journey quite well. It also centers around togetherness and determination, which lend themselves to the aforementioned themes of humility and family. And then of course, forgiveness and compassion, because by the end of the movie, Abuela Alma is forgiven for all the problems she had caused. And while we'll touch more on this in a minute, it's important to note that this is shown to be a good thing, that forgiving her for the damage she had caused is important. And while the film is not wrong, it probably could have been handled a bit better. On the other end of the spectrum, Turning Red's themes include rebellion, as well as becoming yourself, and puberty, and how it's a terrifying thing that everyone has to go through. However, both films have a very specific theme of generational trauma. They both focus on the idea that trauma can flow from one generation to the next through a variety of means. Turning Red's version of this theme is a bit more on the nose, with the red panda form being a literal representation of generational trauma. Ming was forced into toxic perfectionism, and this led to her doing the same thing with Mei, and it likely stems from Grandma Lee's own childhood. Mei takes this and turns the red panda into her own thing, without being held down by the trauma of her mother and their ancestors.
Mamie? I'm keeping it.
Encanto's theme of generational trauma is less overt and focuses similarly on the toxic perfectionism already mentioned in this entry. However, unlike with Turning Red, where the trauma has been going on since ancient China, the trauma in Encanto is much more recent, due to the trauma coming from the death of Alma's husband, and her pushing that trauma onto her children and her grandkids, leading to Bruno leaving the family and the gift being mostly removed from the family. This category is really close, but we honestly feel that the usage of this theme is handled better in Turning Red. This is partly due to the fact that the trauma, in the ancestral sense, has had hundreds of generations to be at its worst, but also that we can really see the trauma Ming had, which stemmed from her relationship with her own mother, begin to sort of repeat itself with Mei, showing not only that these things can be cyclic, but also come from a place of love or good intentions. Ming isn't a bad person. In fact, she's a loving mother, which makes her a really complex antagonist, and we don't love that Alma was forgiven so easily during Encanto. Now, let's talk a little bit about the film's cultural influences. Both of these films include main characters from a culture typically unseen in Disney films, which was different and a nice selling point for the films as a whole. Encanto focuses on a Colombian family, striking a chord with Hispanic children, due to it featuring a lot of unique cultural icons only seen in South American countries. and the art styles, as well as the influence of magical realism, a literary style created in Colombia, are really beautiful and fun to watch. The cultural representation is a bit more of a central tenet in Turning Red, as the Chinese culture permeates every frame of the film. That, and of course, anime references, which makes sense for an Asian child in the early 2000s. Not to mention the red panda itself, and the way the temple and other parts of the film are designed not only to fit the Chinese aspect, but the Canadian aspect as well. We have to say that we feel that we have to call this section a tie. Both movies really immerse themselves in their respective cultures, and it's hard to pick out a clear winner. Now, a bit of a unique one we wanted to talk about before we wrap things up is the art style. While both movies are indeed 3D animation, they both have very unique and different art styles when you compare the two. Turning Red's art style is more of a cutesy, rounded style that's heavily influenced by anime, and it actually deviates from Pixar's usual style quite a bit. It doesn't try to be too realistic and is quite happy with its hyper-stylized look, making it at times a much more interesting film to look at. Encanto does go for a stylized realism, where all the characters look realistic in a stylized way, but it kinda blends in with other similar-looking Disney films.
All right, hombrecito. You ready?
So, for that reason, we think that Turning Red has the more unique and pleasing art style, and we'll give it the win for this category. And finally, we get to our conclusion. After debating through a bunch of categories that both films did quite great in, we decided that despite our love for the recent film and the great bits that we discussed, we honestly think that Encanto is the better film between the two. Encanto's story, characters, and soundtrack are really just phenomenal, and we love just about everything about the movie. That said, we also think that Turning Red is a funnier and in many cases a more well-rounded movie, but we have to say that Encanto is just a better film overall. But let us know in the comment section if you agree or not, and tell us what we should cover next. Remember to hit that notification bell and binge more of our Turning Red and Encanto videos. But most importantly, stay wicked.